Is doing well. I hope everybody's staying safe. We're now approaching, and then we're into week 10 of our course and our or excuse me, our 10th lesson. This lesson, the reason I wanted to really get a video out is because this lesson is really a synthesis type of lesson where you're applying all of the previous information and time and energy you put into those previous lessons to really get down to an application sort of lesson this week. So lesson 10 is all about developing an effective intervention to solve some type of issue or to address some type of issue in an organizational setting. And as a leader, this is extremely important that you're able to go through this process. So this week, your main assignment is to follow what our text refers to as a four-step intervention design process. But I actually want to get a little bit into that because I don't agree with that it's a four-step process. But anyways, what you're going to basically be doing is you're going to be following kind of a holistic problem identification process by which the outcome is an effective intervention that you can put into play to resolve or to reduce an issue that you see in your work environment. So, what are the parts of this intervention process? The reason I call it a problem kind of address is because we talk about this intervention. We talk about it as an intervention development process, but the intervention is really the outcome of this process. It's a very linear, scientifically based. It's basically the scientific method in a nutshell for how we identify a problem in our environment. So the first step is identification of a problem. That's all about who are our players within an identified problem. Who is involved. How do we know that it's a problem? That's needs identification. If you need an easy way to remember that need, think about it in terms of a scale. You've identified something in your environment that is a problem, right? So that's the current state in your environment, in your organizational environment, and you have a need to get to a better state. So basically, an intervention is supposed to balance, right? It's supposed to tip those scales, right? So that you mitigate the problem, you reduce the problem by putting an effective intervention in place or by putting an effective program in place to address that. So that's the first step, and that's the first part of your assignment is you're going to be required to talk about what is the problem and how do I know it's a problem and who does it impact, who does it affect, and who is involved in the issue. Number two is the identification. Once you've identified the problem and you've identified the folks that are involved in it, you have to think about the precipitants and the perpetuating factors that are involved in this problem. Like, why is it occurring? What was the genesis of it? So why did it start becoming a problem, or how did it come into being? And what factors have allowed it to continue within that environment? Because that's going to be the basis for what you design an intervention to address. Right? It's either going to address those core issues, so to stop something from to address maybe say a cultural issue, maybe one of the genesis factors, right? Those precipitating factors that needs to be changed, or is it some active behavioral mechanism in the workplace, right? Some active behavior that's perpetuating this current problem or this current need in your environment. So you're going to really want to look at what is keeping the problem going, or what is causing it to grow, in need. Number three, that is the actual intervention development right there. So there's a lot that goes into it. And as an evaluator, I don't know if you guys, I'm pretty sure I said this at the beginning, but I'm an evaluation director. I'm an evaluation specialist at my core. So, when we talk about this process, this is program design, this is program implementation. And the actual intervention doesn't come until after we have pinpointed, identified, looked at the actual factors and developed a model for the change that needs, or excuse me, the need that needs to be addressed. And so when we get to step 3, when we get to the actual intervention process, we've already identified those precipitants, we've identified causal factors, we've identified the groups that need to be included in the intervention. And so at that point we can say, okay, we know what the problem is, now we need to determine the activities or the solution that we're going to use in order to mitigate those factors. So step 3, that's an intervention. But in order to do that, we have to not only define the activities, right, that are part of that intervention, but we have to think about what we actually want to achieve. So that main part of the intervention, there's several different components. Your assignment, what I would like to see is a logic model, a simple logic model that you can show, which is just a visual tool that shows me what are the activities, what is the intervention activity, and what are the associated outcomes. And you're going to see a couple different terms. You're going to see objectives and outcomes, or objectives and goals, and so on and so forth. All that's talking about, those are just time-bound terms. Objectives are what we consider to be short-term outcomes from your intervention activity. So if you have a seminar, right, for microaggressions in your organizational environment, your objective from that activity is to change attitudes or to raise awareness, right? So that's your objective. But that objective should then lead to, right, actual behavioral change down the line. So using that same example, we change their behavior or we make them more aware, which then results in more long-term change by a reduction in microaggressions. So it's all about making sure that not only we don't just define what we're going to do, but how what we're going to do is going to impact or mitigate or reduce that problem in our environment. And that's absolutely critical, because you can't just throw things at people. You have to be able to define, why is what I'm doing going to be effective? And this is at the point where I said that was considered to be the design of the implementation, the design of the intervention. Then you implement the intervention, but that's not the end of the story. That's typically in the past where people have stopped because they've just said, okay, well, I know that there's a problem and I'm going to do this thing, right? But that's not the end of it. You need an effective evaluation of that implementation or of that intervention to actually see if what you're doing is going to have an effect, and to be able to track the success of that across time. And so that logic model that you created during your development phase is also used as your evaluation tool, right? It's used to inform your evaluation. And so what I'm looking for, I absolutely want to see, is I want you to be able to tell me, I'm doing this intervention, this is specifically what I'm doing, and I'm going to be collecting information to show these results. Right? So whatever you're doing, I want you to tell me what is going to happen as a result of participation in my intervention in the short term, in terms of your objectives, and in the intermediate and long term, in terms of actual behavioral change that results as a result of participating in the intervention. Because that's my bread and butter, people. I mean, that's what we have to do, because we waste resources. We need to be aware of the fact that evaluation is not only about tracking, but it's about how to measure. So you have to think about that. Not only do I want to say that I'm expecting attitude change as a result of my intervention. How are you going to measure that? Are you going to do a survey? Are you going to do an observation during your training session, or whatever your intervention ends up being? How are you going to collect data effectively in order to show or to demonstrate your effects? And it's absolutely essential because it impacts the validity of your intervention through process evaluation, data collection, because you're trying to figure out, is my actual intervention valid, right? You're talking about the efficacy. Is it producing a high level of impact? Is it having a strong effect, or does it need to be modified to be more effective? And also the viability. It's that return on investment. If you create an intervention that's just super costly or super time consuming, and it doesn't produce a high enough impact or change behavior enough to actually be worthwhile, then you wouldn't know that unless you did a formal evaluation of that intervention. And so that's an absolute essential component, and I hate how they downplay this. And you'll see in this lesson, I didn't write this lesson, but you'll see from the text, they'll say, oh, we have a 4-step process, and some consider evaluation to be the 5th step. Evaluation is the 5th step. That is how you measure the success of your evaluation, or excuse me, of your intervention, to make sure that what you're doing and what you've determined you need to do in order to address a problem is actually being addressed, and you're actually mitigating that issue. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Your assignment is very clear. You follow that decision. I mean, you follow that process, right? Identification of problem, identification of precipitants and perpetuating factors, intervention design with a logic model, or they also use theory of change, but I'm not expecting you to have a theory of change. A logic model is a visual chain, right, showing how we get from activities to outcomes, right? So from our intervention activity to, right, actual change within our environment. And then I want you to a certain extent, and of course this is a practice for week 11, but to think about your evaluation plan for that. How are you going to be able to tell, and how are you going to measure the effect of your intervention on its participants? And so all of this is leading to lesson 11. So November 9th, you're going to have a midterm project, which is basically an expanded version of your week 10 assignment. Your week 11 project is where I expect you to go into more detail on this 5-step process, this 5-step intervention process. And so I will not grade harshly on this lesson 10 assignment because this is a learning, right? We're in an applied learning or an experiential learning process here, but I am expecting you to have a comprehensive, obviously a short, right, not an in-depth program design or intervention design, but to have a comprehensive design by the time we get to our midterm project that's due on November 9th. So I would also suggest that as you're reading this, go to your course schedule for week 10. Make sure that you read the Grumman, Schneider, and Coates chapter on program evaluation and intervention design. That'll help with a lot of these concepts. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to ask me any questions you may have. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. But I just wanted to make sure that I made this clear, because this is really the culmination of everything we've been doing with critical thinking and being able to understand, how statistics play into this, and how we use different resources, and how we basically build our foundation of knowledge in order to be able to be effective leaders by integrating information and being able to gather feedback on our work environment. All right. I hope you all have a fantastic week, and thanks for putting up with my 13-minute video. Thank you.